just clearing out any grease around the take-up spool and making sure that's nice and clean in there. I've just got dust in there at the moment. Dust is all that's left, and dust is best removed with a dry paintbrush and a blower, and that's best done after you've got rid of any grease, because grease will act as a glue to keep dust and grit and stuff in place. Cleaning cameras thoroughly like this gives you the opportunity, well, it forces you to look closely at the camera, and you may notice problems that otherwise you would overlook. So it's useful. It's not a waste of time. It's one of the reasons that soldiers spend an inordinate amount of time cleaning their kit, and firemen spend an inordinate amount of time polishing their engines. It's because it forces you to look very closely at the item concerned and allows you to spot things that otherwise your eye would just gloss over. Given the state of the dried grease in this particular camera, I think it very unlikely that the film advance mechanism had ever been out of the chassis. Alright, I think that's close enough for me. That'll do. And I'll get rid of my dirty paper and I can move on to the next task. I think the body there is clean enough for me to work with. I've got to get rid of the dust in there, but that's about it. I need to turn my attention to the shutter now, which we already know is floating loose on its backing plate. Let me remove the lens, pop that to one side, and start here. I'm going to start from the front of the shutter here, remove the control rings from the front of the shutter. The top screw here has been filled with some red paint. That may have been the source of the red paint that was visible elsewhere on the camera. I'm just putting a daub of acetone on there to soften that paint up. That red dot helps as an alignment dot to show you where to install the lens. It's also a cunning trick if you've made a mess of getting the 3 screws out neatly from the front ring. If one of the screws is damaged, you make that one the top screw, and then you put a little daub of red paint on it, and everyone thinks you're clever. Right, so the front rings can come off. I remove the coupling pinion for the meter connection. That's it for the front. At the back, there are 4 screws in here, down in these holes. A bit awkward to get your screwdriver on. That's one. That's two. That's three, and that was loose. Oh, I can actually see this one. Four. Tip those out. Now I have my flash connection to disconnect here. I told you there's a tiny screw in that little plastic terminal block, for want of a better word. I'll just loosen that up. Here we have it. The shutter's off. That plastic terminal block or connector is here. It's just a little plastic cylinder with a screw in from the side, and it's used to connect your flash sync tab here on the shutter to the flash sync wire here on the housing. That wire's a bit ugly looking. People have done cruel things to that over time. Pop the shutter to one side at the moment. We need to look at this front plate. Now this is rattling to bits because the 4 screws were missing from the back. To take it completely apart so I can clean it and get it ready for reassembly, take 3 screws out from this chrome trim. Now the chrome trim is quite ugly. I think I mentioned there was a lot of marks on there, possibly from sticky tape, possibly something else. Should be able to lift this off with a bit of luck. It seems a bit sticky and reluctant. That's odd. That's better. There's our chrome trim plate. With that out of the way, we can lift off the black trim here. Now that's brass, but it's been painted black. In this case it doesn't look very pretty. And this piece here just fits on over the top. And we're down to the base plate. Now this base plate has obviously got corrosion products and old glue here, and I'll want to get that off straight away. That was where the leatherettes were loose at the front of the camera, and I would say that they had been glued back over the top of existing corrosion, and that's why the leatherette was loose at that point. And the same on this side, but to a much lesser extent. Give that a wipe with some naphtha to start off with, see if that cleans it. I can feel a ridge of adhesive still there. So I'll give that another scrape, and then I'll use some of that CRC Electra Clean. Yeah, that's very old glue. That's a brittle looking stuff, probably like shellac or something of that nature. That's a bit better. Clean this panel off. Excuse me. Right, I'm back. The inside surface here will just have old oil and stuff on it more than anything else, so that cleans up much easier than the outside surface that had the glue on it. And it doesn't need to be sparkling anyway. Just make sure I remove all traces of old oil and grease. Check the action of that gear set, make sure that runs freely. It looks good. This set down here that couples to the exposure meter settings. It couples to the drum that has the cord on it, which couples to the meter at the top of the camera. It looks quite good. It's just a spot of corrosion there. We'll just scrape them off. The brass usually looks a bit tarnished like that. That's nothing unusual, and there's nothing untoward in that. That's fine. Let's have a look at this piece. This is the chrome trim. Now that was quite stained up and ugly looking. So I'll give that a wipe. It may clean up quite well. There may be corrosion there that won't clean away. It's looking very promising so far. There's a lot of it's very marked at the front here. That's where I suspect things were held together with sticky tape. And of course the adhesive has been left behind. The residue is quite visible. Little bit of corrosion right along that top edge. That's where it sits down in that brass black painted trim. That will be invisible. Alright, it's cleaning up fairly well. At this corner I've got the residue from the adhesive used to hold the nameplate in position. And there's still a bit of residue from whichever sticky tape they'd used to hold this all in place when they were trying to stop the camera from falling to pieces. Well, that's coming clean. It's still dirt and things coming off it. That cleaned right back to the chrome. Get rid of all traces of that stuff. That looks good. Give it a wipe around the inside. That looks good. I'm going to use some acetone on it and see if I can clean up this spot a little bit better. But it's already looking considerably better than it did. That's good. You can see by the colour on that cotton bud that there's a certain amount of contamination of the metal surface. It may have been that the person who owned the camera was a smoker, and it may be the nicotine stain that we've got on that surface. Right, so that piece is done. This aluminium piece. This has a few marks of corrosion and dirt on it. This piece is entirely hidden. As long as all loose dust and corrosion is gone, that's not going to cause us any problem. The inside edge here looks good. That's fine. What's that? Fleck of black. Oh, it's just a bit of paint. Just run around this with the toothpick, make sure that that edge is all clear. That's good. This piece. There's a bit of green there. That's verdigris. It'll be corrosion on that brass underneath the paint. Bit rough at this corner, some of that's where the paint is chipped off. Some of it will be adhesive from the leatherette when the leatherettes were glued back in place underneath this. Some of it is just corrosion because dissimilar metals have been sitting in close proximity. There's certainly something stuck on that. Don't know what that is. Certainly corrosion at the bottom there. This is the back surface I'm cleaning. None of that is seen. And the front surface I'm cleaning now. All that's ever seen is this edge. I just want any dirt and dust out from inside this piece. I'll reassemble this and see what it looks like. I'm of the view it looks ugly enough that I want to strip the paint off this and repaint that. However, we shall see. So, this part goes together like that, and like that. And like that. And there's 3 screws which holds that all together. There are 4 screws that hold the aluminium centrepiece to the brass plate at the back. That trim, yeah, it does look a little bit too ugly. I think I will be having to deal with that. So that'll mean getting, I think a can of black spray paint will be the answer. I'll have to troop around and see what I can find. Find something that's durable, hard and will stay where it's put. And all I've got to do is make sure that these edges are covered. I could probably get away with doing it with a brush, to tell the truth. There's such small areas. And then those components can be reassembled again. I can probably just about reassemble that aluminium piece right now, to tell the truth, if I had the 4 screws. I'll find them. Well, it'd be nice to say that the touch-up paint job came out perfectly. Well, it didn't really, but it's come out okay. I'm going to reassemble these components on the front panel regardless. So my 4 screws. These were the screws that were loose. None of them were connected at all previously. And they were just rattling around loose inside the camera. I suppose it's fortunate they hadn't managed to escape. Right, I'll find a better screwdriver and tighten those up. Right, here they are, just behind me. We don't want any repeats of that coming loose. So each of them will be locked in place with a little bit of lacquer. You can see we've got our contrast problem back again. So we'll just deal with that white piece of paper, make life easy for the camera. This one here I've got to be a bit more cautious about, because I don't want it coming underneath that lever and causing that lever to stick. That looks fine. I'll put that on there so it's not sticking to the tabletop. Here is our trim and the chrome trim. That's a very ugly flash wire, that one. I think it'll do regardless. I don't think it'll get me in any trouble. Press that all down into place. And I should have 3 screws to hold that in place. Of course, I didn't sort them out before starting to do the video, because that would take all the fun out of it. So I'll have to grab them as I go. There's another one. And somewhere there should be the 3rd. since I can't have already put it somewhere in the incorrect position. I'm not sure why I can't lay my hands on it. Wait a second. That's him there. Alright, those 3 screws can be done up tight. They are not prone to coming loose, and it wouldn't make any difference if they did, because they're trapped between the shutter and the plate. Well, that's that little bit dealt with, really. Oh, I really don't like the look of that flash wire though. I'll have to put a bit of heat shrink over that at the very least. It's in danger of shorting out on something. That should do it. There's no danger of that shorting out on anything now. Well, there's our headline problem with the camera dealt with anyway. That is no longer loose on the front panel. So that little piece has been dealt with. And I think next I'll have to turn my attention to the shutter itself.